tutorial explains how to make a multi-level internal standard calibration by the batch table. This method here is set up with a set of compounds, and we see that, for example, compound number 14 is an internal standard, and also compound number 4 is an internal standard. And the internal standard group, all those compounds having number 1 are quantified with this internal standard number 1. The same logic for the others. The compound with number 10, zimazine, and all the following are quantified to the internal standard with a number 2. Also, we do have different levels of concentrations in the compound table, but there is no data file associated at the moment to these kind of compounds. So for this we go for a batch table, and here I created a little batch table using different data files. So the first run in this batch is a standard, and the standard is initialize calibration curve. The I stands for initialize. That makes sure if there is any calibration inside the method, it will be deleted. All the subsequent runs are standards, and that means the levels are added to the calibration points done in the previous run. So the data files I'm using here is 01 ppm 052, and I process 1 ppm, which is a calibration run. I process that as an unknown here. So going back to the calibration window here, we see we do have 01, 05, 1 and 2 in concentration, and we process concentration level number 3 as an unknown. So we quantify level 1, level 2 and level 4 and process level 3. Go back to the batch table. This explains the numbers here. Level number 1 is the first calibration, level number 2 the second calibration, and the 2 ppm standard is level number 4 in the method. Here that is the unknown, so it doesn't matter what kind of level number it's indicated here. The internal standard amount in the calibration here, this number, this is obviously a multi-level internal standard calibration because we have more than one internal standard, and the corresponding concentrations of the internal standard can be different. This is called a multi-level internal standard, and the internal standard amounts are indicated here. So these are the different groups of internal standard. This, for example, the first internal standard, and we can define here the corresponding concentration. So this is the method. Then analysis type must be set integration for quantitative and quantification calculations. These are the two things we have to set up. Then we can start processing the batch table. So ideally the software should have created a calibration curve and quantified the last unknown against that calibration curve. How can we see that? First of all, we check the calibration curve, so we go back to calibration window, and now we see the assigned data files which has not been assigned to the corresponding levels beforehand, and we also see a calibration curve for all of these compounds. Remember, we calibrate level 1, level 2 and level 4, and we want to check the level 3 as an internal as an unknown. So there is a nice calibration curve for all these compounds, and we just save this method then, which is automatically created. So we go for data analysis to see the result of the unknown, and we click the Explorer, And the data file we checked, I show here again in the batch table, was the 1 ppm initial. That should be calibrated, quantified against the calibration curve. So I open that up, click that in, and I see here clearly a result table, and I see the calculated concentration based on the area ratio relative to an internal standard. The internal standard calibration is a ratio calibration curve, but the concentration calculated here is no longer a ratio. This is the real concentration of that compound calculated out of the area ratio in the concentration of the internal standard. Finally, after having this kind of analysis, there is a possibility to make a quantitation report. So we click report here, and the report with the yellow background is a report which is saved inside the data file. So for that reason, if I click here chromatogram, click and drag that in, I already have the corresponding chromatogram of the data file. Most likely we would like to have a quantitation table, so that icon here gives me the quantitation table, quantitation results. So we have the compounds, retention time, masses, areas, and concentrations. That's the easiest report we can do.